Okay, thanks, Dennis. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here to come here to collectively celebrate and hopefully in a substantive and thoughtful and personal, but also hopefully in a lighthearted and fundamentally happy way, the career of Professor Cynthia Stohl. I'm Shiv Ganesh. I'm a professor of communication studies at the University of Texas in Austin. And there are going to be about 5 of us speaking this evening. I'll talk first, and following me is Professor Dennis Mumby, who's a professor emeritus at UNC Chapel Hill, followed by Dennis is Professor Linda Putnam, who's professor emerita at UC Santa Barbara. Following her is Dr. Oana Albu from Copenhagen Business School, and finally, Professor Janet Fulk, professor emerita at USC, and Professor Peter Monge, who is also professor emeritus at USC. Following that, Cynthia will say a few words. I want to say thank you to all the people who've made this possible, especially the University of California, Santa Barbara, that's helping sponsor a small reception with a cash bar afterwards, in case you're all able to stay for that. We would love that. But on though to the main event. Professor Cynthia Stohl's accomplishments are legendary. I know some of the other speakers are going to talk about them some more, but some of them are worth mentioning multiple times. President of this association, ICA Fellow, Distinguished Scholar of the National Communication Association, winner of the Stephen Chaffee Career Achievement Award, a publication record of hundreds of pieces that is in its 55th year, dating to before she got her PhD from Purdue University in 1982. This record is now an impressively coherent trajectory of research on organizational and group communication processes that highlight their communicative and cultural embeddedness. Professor Stohl's early and pioneering attention to the permeable and networked nature of interpersonal and group processes took her on an intellectual journey from micro to macro communication processes. And this journey ultimately found, I think, its fullest expression in the study of collective action, globalization, and technological visibility. Her early work on shop floor dynamics, participation, and the communicative power of memorable messages culminated in the development, along with Professor Putnam here, in the hugely influential theory of bona fide groups, which is now one of the most cited theories in group communication. And this work, coupled with her early critique of the US-centered parochialism of communication studies, which we still grapple with today, led to an abiding interest in communication networks and globalization. And in the last 2 decades, her work has turned to the global and technological dynamics of collective action and the communicative force of digital visibility. And in the process, she has increasingly focused her research onto issues of deep social and environmental significance, including global social justice issues, corporate social responsibility and regulation, sustainability, collective participation, human rights, and contemporary crisis. So this is the Cynthia Stohl that all of us in this room know. And more than this, I suppose, well, most of us in this room also know Professor Stohl as warm-hearted, smart as a whip, sharp, compassionate, well-spoken, diplomatic, hardworking, productive, charming, blunt, friendly, family-oriented. So most of us know this, but what I want to spend the next few minutes doing is talking a little about how I came to know her and how we work together, because I think those two things are actually utterly unique. August 11th, 1995 was an inordinately hot day in Lafayette, Indiana. It was the day I first set foot on an American college campus. Jerry Garcia had just died, and I'd spent the previous day driving to Indiana with my uncle and aunt, listening to Grateful Dead music and speculating about what my first week on an American campus would be like. I'm not a deadhead, but that music set the stage for what I knew would be a momentous week, my first full week ever in the United States. What would classes be like? What kind of community would I have? Would it be as conservative as I had been told? Who would I meet? Little did I know that the most important thing that would happen to me that first day on campus was that I would meet Cynthia and Michael Stohl under completely different circumstances. Michael as Dean of International Students, brandishing a tennis racket as an orientation attention getter, and Cynthia perched on a high table at the introductory session at the Department of Communication, which was across campus. Cynthia was a vibrant and visible presence on campus, and someone who I interacted with as well in my first year there, and who I think liked me back as much as I liked her. But our friendship began unexpectedly a few years later when the AIDS Memorial quilt rolled into town. One September at the Purdue Memorial Union, my friend Chris had just died, and I went to the exhibit to read a set of names, including his. And much to my surprise, I saw Cynthia stand up and go to the podium and read several names out loud. She noticed me, acknowledged me, and nodded, and then came to sit by me when I was done. We sat on the steps outside Stewart Center for several hours that evening, talking about why we were there and what that meant for us. And that was the moment when I knew a friendship had begun. Since then, we've stayed in each other's houses, gone on holidays, drank too much together, written a formidable amount, raged at and celebrated the world around us, and done all the things really good friends do. But I've always looked back at that first deeply personal conversation as the moment when we made a genuine connection. Over the next few years, Cynthia became department chair, stepped onto my PhD committee at the last minute, helped me through a tough situation when I was about to be thrown out of the United States, pushed me into taking my first job at the University of Montana rather than Tulane. And then she and Michael left Purdue after more than 30 years to take on new jobs at UC Santa Barbara, where Cynthia's successes in particular have been absolutely monumental. But it was one day in 2004 at an organizational communication mini conference at the University of Texas in Austin, when we were sitting outside in what I now know to be the Walter Cronkite Plaza outside the Jesse Jones Communication Building, when we turned to each other and said, "Why have we never written together?" So, after another fateful conversation in what would become an equally consequential location for me, we started exchanging ideas about social movements and collective action. A few years later, when I had moved to New Zealand, another job she pushed me to take, our collaboration began in earnest once we got a grant from the Royal Society. And since then, over the last 21 years, we have published 22 pieces together, sometimes with others, but mostly just between us. And I have said that the Ganesh Stohl entity, as we sometimes jokingly call our collaborative work, would have received tenure by itself. I want to talk about this collaboration a little bit because it has been like nothing else that and I dare say the people around Cynthia and I have ever experienced. In most collaborations, tasks are clear, roles are specified, goals are established, and outcomes are produced, and projects are concluded. Not for us. I remember one of our first papers, which later became a grant application, and I wrote something and she looked at it and said, "I hate it." And much to my surprise, I replied, and I think I said, "So what?" That set the tone. We argued about that sentence until we were both happy with it. And then for years, we would actually write sentences together. We would come up with ideas together and then argue about them, write an entire paper and argue about it, split it into two, present one half at a conference, and then publish the other half. I began to get really used to her saying, not just "I hate it," but "I hate it, I hate it, I hate it." And more often, "I love it, I love it, I love it." And the moments when we both went, "Wow, that's it, it's perfect," were sometimes few and far between, but when we got there, it was magic. And so for 22 years, we talked, and we argued. We read, then we argued some more. We drank, and then we argued. We wrote, and we rewrote, and then we argued. We ate far too much, and we argued. We hiked, we walked, we played, we argued. And at the end, what we did was not arguing at all. not really. It was producing something that neither of us could have done on our own. This intense, hilarious, and deep dynamic resulted in some of what I think are our best ideas about everything from activism and brokerage to organizational archetypes to hybridity and fluidity, and more recently, fractured visibility and global crises. Both of us now write, sometimes channeling the other. And to this day, I look at our text and I cannot tell who wrote what. People around us, and our partners in particular, are sometimes bewildered at what the heck we are actually up to together, or how we ever get anything done. I remember a few years ago, Michael asked us how we were doing, and we both said, fabulous, it's going really well. And he just said, wait until tomorrow. Sure enough, the next day, we had split the paper 3 ways. But these seemingly discarded ideas, these split papers, have all made it into print in one form or the other. And it just seems to me that this generation of all this text is just been the staging ground for a deeper meeting of the minds and the hearts. I have never experienced such a fundamentally dialogic and ultimately transformative connection. And I am so, so grateful to you, Cynthia, for bringing that into my life. And most of all, thank you for being my mentor, my collaborator, my colleague, and most of all, my friend.
Thank you. I hope I've got the right. Can I come down front? Is that okay? Will you see me okay? If I come down here? I'm tall enough, yeah. I am tall enough. So I brought 2 clickers because I'm not sure which is the right one. The smaller one? Okay, okay. So to begin with, I have a bit of a confession to make, which is that I never intended to come to ICA this year. I was perfectly happy at home in retirement, pottering around on my bike. Pottering around on my bike? No, pottering around in my garden, out on my bike, breaking my collarbone, recovering from breaking my collarbone. And then Shiv contacted me, and he said, Dennis, there's a question that's bedeviled not only the field of communication, not only the field of organizational communication, but the field of communication more generally. It is a question I have seen promising academic careers crash and burn trying to answer this question. I have seen departments riven asunder trying to address this question. I have seen attack ships in flames off the shoulder of Orion. I said, Shiv, what the fuck are you talking about? He said, okay, so I'm sorry. He said, I got carried away. Let me put the question in a form that you might understand. So he said, I want you to come to ICA, and I want you to put to bed this question. And the question is, how do we explain Cynthia Stohl? I said, oh, come on, man. That is a one-way mission. There is no coming back from that question. He said, well, look, Dennis, think about it this way. You've had a long, occasionally successful career. So think of this as sort of your ultimate sacrifice to the field of organizational communication, that you have to address this question. I said, okay, I'll come, I'll do it. But I thought, I've got to consider this really carefully. I have to bring to bear all of my intellectual resources. So what I basically did to prepare for this was I read Cynthia's entire oeuvre. Obviously, it took me an incredibly long time. I decided that I need to develop a multi-method approach to this. So first of all, I did a complete Derridian deconstructive analysis of her work. looking at all the binary oppositions, the modes of deferral, the deferral of meaning that existed in her work. Secondly, I did a Gramscian ideological analysis, looking at the various forms of hegemony and consent that exist in her work. I mean, all this took a very long time, I want you to know. Thirdly, I did a Foucauldian geological analysis, looking at the sort of the paraknowledge regimes that are clearly embedded into her work. And then finally, and probably most obviously for me, I did a multivariate analysis. And let me tell you, the number of variates that I was able to identify and the relationships between the variates, I could go on and on about it. A lot of it would probably go over your head. I know I'm short on time, so I need to move on. So after examining all of that data, exploring it in multiple ways, I think I have the answer to the question of how do we explain Cynthia Stohl. And you ready for this? The answer to that question is 81. 81. And just let me put this in context, because in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything is, as we all know, 42, right? So Cynthia is 39 more than that. 39 more than the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. Now, what does that number actually refer to? Okay, is it Cynthia's number of publications? Clearly not, because she's published way more than that. Is it the number of times I hung out at the Stohl's house when I lived in West Lafayette and ate and hung out and chatted? No, because I did it way more than that. Is it the number of times that Cynthia has threatened to divorce Michael? No, because it's way more than that. Just so you know, Cynthia sends Michael a letter on every wedding anniversary agreeing to be married to him for another year. This year, apparently, it arrived by email, which it kind of means that Michael has been on a 56-year-long adjunct appointment. I mean, talk about job insecurity, job precarity. But it seems to work. It seems to work for them. Well, actually, the real answer to this question is this, right? Those are Cynthia's co-authors. Over the years, she has had 81 different co-authors. And to me, this basically speaks to who Cynthia is as a person, as a scholar. I suggest that Cynthia is characterized by the 3 C's. Now, I actually only had 2 C's until yesterday when I heard Silvio Weisbord's presidential address, in which he talked about the cosmopolitan imagination. So we don't only have a CCO in our field, we now have CCC in our field, the 3 C's for Cynthia. So I suggest that Cynthia is all about connectedness in action, okay? It's no accident that the subtitle of her 1995 book, Organizational Communication, is Connectedness in Action. And in some respects, Cynthia actually is in sort of the long tradition of American pragmatism, right? And this is why sort of the title of my piece was, originally it was Cynthia Stohl, Stealth Critical Theorist. Now I added or critical pragmatist. I think in many ways, a critical pragmatist approach kind of speaks more clearly to what Cynthia does, that she's really about exploring the ways in which community arises out of difference. Merritt Parker Follett said that fear of difference is fear of life itself. Social transformation emerges from the creative friction of difference. And I think Cynthia understands in a really fundamental way what creative friction is about. I mean, she sort of works in that mode. And I think, Shiv, I think really sort of appreciates that idea. Mary Parker Follett said, in terms of talking about the nature of power, when you and I decide a course of action together and do that thing, you have no power over me, nor I over you, but we have power over ourselves together. And again, I think that really effectively describes what Cynthia does and how she works and how she connects with people in the most fundamental way. But it's no accident that if you run into Cynthia at the end of a conference, she has invariably lost her voice, right? Because she talks with people, she connects with people in a really, I think, profound way. So secondly, I would describe Cynthia as somebody who engages with people in a convivial way. This idea, it's an idea that comes from Paul Gilroy, who's a cultural studies researcher. He came up with this term in his book, After Empire. And conviviality is about everyday interactions and the process of cohabitation that make multiculture an ordinary part of social life. Shared existence and connection, an emphasis on fluidity and ease with difference. And again, I think the interesting thing about Cynthia is she doesn't really care what your theoretical perspective is, right? I mean, Cynthia and I are incredibly different in terms of our philosophical, conceptual, theoretical backgrounds. But working with her was an amazing and formative experience for me. I mean, she's interested in creative, exciting, interesting ideas that have transformative potential. So in this sense, convivial relations are alive with a radical openness that makes a nonsense of closed, fixed, and reified identity and turns attention toward the always unpredictable mechanisms of identification, right? So this idea of closeness and fixity is sort of diametrically opposite to the ways in which Cynthia works. I mean, in many respects, she's sort of about fluidity. And then finally, I would say, as I was listening to Silvio give his address yesterday, it occurred to me that in many respects, Cynthia embodies a cosmopolitan imagination, that she's all about curiosity. She's all about, being critical and self-reflexive, that she's all about connection. And in many respects, she really does have a recognition of the importance of an open, borderless character of academic work. I know I'm short, so just in closing, my mom was a huge fan of the Stohls. And when she passed in 2018, I inherited these two massive boxes of photographs. And as I was looking through these photographs, I discovered this picture. Which I actually have a companion picture, which I actually shared with Nash, and I think Nash actually shared that picture with you, which was at the same event. I think this was taken sometime in the 90s in London. We were at dinner. My mom was there. My younger brother was there. And my mom, every time I would go back to the UK, my mom would always say, "Have you seen Michael and Cynthia? How are they doing? I'd love to see them again." She always asked me about them. And in many respects, you guys, I mean, I've known you both for over 35 years. I can't tell you how much you both meant to me as friends, as colleagues, as collaborators. And, I think this picture kind of embodies both your not only your relationship to each other, but how you think about other people. And I know in many respects, retirement is sort of a fiction for you two. So I know we're going to be seeing you both a great deal, but I wish you both all the happiness for the future. Thank you. Can I disconnect this? Yeah.
No.
Oh, sorry.
Mhm.
What's happened? Okay.
We've lost the screen.
We've lost it. Okay, very good, very good. Well, this is more than a challenge to try to talk about summarizing Cynthia Stohl's contributions and a relationship that's gone on since 1978. How many years? A long one in many universities. I'm going to start by kind of filling in the blanks, because if you're here and you don't know all the things Cynthia's done, I want you to be blown away by some of it. I want to tell you a little bit more about her accomplishments and her awards and what's happened. First of all, she and I met at Purdue, 1978. She was a graduate student, and I was this little bitty assistant professor, scared to death there. So anyway, we met and worked together in terms of teaching a basic course. And we actually worked and thought about, opportunities we had together. Turns out she finished her doctorate not too long after I arrived. She was a doctorate in interpersonal communication. So Charles Redding and I, and I think Phil Tompkins, wanted to get her out of the throes of interpersonal communication. And so we did, as she applied for the job, it was an OrgComm job. And we were overjoyed that she was interested in really taking some of her interpersonal work and the things she had done and channeling it more to OrgComm. Well, this occurred. She is like a foundation there at Purdue University. She's there as many years she was. She's the Margaret Church Distinguished Professor there. She, of course, was head of the department. In terms of her career as a whole, in addition to all the awards that Shiv mentioned, she has 18 top papers, 10 kind of overall association-wide awards, 10 outstanding teaching awards, including she's the Book of Great Teachers at Purdue University. Award none of us ever thought could be possible to be in. She has over 120 publications, you're right, Dennis, and counting, many more than 81. 11,700 citations, H factor of 45. It's everything you would, when you look at all the awards and stuff, everything you would ever do. So her career has just been absolutely amazing. I want to go back to that moment when we worked together there at Purdue and begin to talk about something that we both kind of developed together and how this came about. Shiv mentioned the Bona Fide Group Project. Well, this was 1990, and Cynthia and I were trying to find some things we were both very dissatisfied with the way groups were all laboratory and the kind of constraints. We were both moved in organizational ways and hoping that we could kind of begin to theorize and think more about what it would look like if you put groups and organizations in society as a whole. So the Bona Fide Group perspective, we came up with something called stable but permeable boundaries, where we're looking at multiple memberships coming in and out, but yet the boundaries stay there. They're not too tightly fixed. They're not too porous. We also began to look at this notion of interdependence with context, the immediate context and how that might have. And while this could be talked about in terms of her as a scholar, I'm interested in how it shaped her scholarship overall, completely overall. So I'm going to turn to the back of this article. We gave suggestions for future research and reasons why you should take a bona fide perspective. And I'll contend Cynthia embraced it all in the work that she has done. One of those reasons was to improve vitality, creativity, and the innovative constructs that we can have in the field. So what do we have from her? You already heard of this, memorable messages. And while we know this construct, and we knew it, of course, it was in both the interpersonal context in 1981 when it was published, but then it became into org, and it's looking to socialization, downsizing, memorable messages and socialization, and now in health communication. It's widely used in health, looking at memorable messages and breast cancer treatment, and it's in our textbooks. People have picked it up and used that. Another construct she has introduced, mentioned at the end of that, we ought to look at secrecy in groups. So what has Cynthia done? Well, let's go look at secret agencies, and with Michael at clandestine organizations. This work, I think, embodied the permeable boundaries, the interdependence with context, and I think it introduced what we now know and see as an area of outcome called hidden organization. And I think that work, again, award-winning work that was there. Another thing we came up and then talked about was how could we reframe traditional concepts? What could we do in terms of looking at a bona fide perspective to begin to look at those? It's already been discussed a great deal by Shiv about collective action. It is a totally reframed construct because of Cynthia Stohl's work, early work. Award-winning articles, award-winning books. She brought in social media, environmental, international, and intercultural that actually made collective action a new kind of face, a new kind of construct. One of my very favorites is participation. Early on, Cynthia studied quality circle groups in New Zealand. And these were kind of groups where the employees were to have voice. They're supposed to give an input to production and what quality of what was happening. Her work in that, and later on, some of the work in quality circles in Indiana and everything, led her to one of, I think, the most important pieces she's contributed to. Participation isn't always involuntary. It can be forced. It isn't always something that emancipates. It actually is labor, and we have paradoxes of participation. And it is a widely cited, amazing contribution. Absence as workplace control, which came out of that, and began to shape the way we began to even look at democracy in the workplace. And she was foundational in doing it. Another one that we talked about doing more work on was stakeholders. How could groups be related to the stakeholders? And this was interdependence with immediate context, trying to think about that, the permeable boundaries also with it. And Cynthia's work on corporate social responsibility has pushed that one way beyond what we ever thought. Boundary regulation, social media policies, global international ways, and human rights of thinking about corporate social responsibility. The last one has been mentioned a lot, so I'm not going to talk about it more, is the notion of connectedness, the very body that she is, as well as her scholarship in general. She's done more work on metaphors, connectedness and action, as we've talked about, collaborating groups, even looking at connectedness in terms of paradoxes and, of course, in terms of social media. Overall, if you take this scholarship or this wealth of this scholarship, she has shaped the field in so many ways. She's not only charted new directions, but she's situated research at the nexus of group, organization, and environment. And she's done this throughout her career and has made it possible for so many scholars to adopt her work, her new concepts, and to be part of this community that she's helped develop. She's a stellar scholar, an absolutely amazing colleague, and in my heart, most of the genuine friend. I salute and thank you both for all that you've done in my life and for all the opportunities I've had to work with you and to be part of this creation and part of shaping this field. Thank you, Cynthia, for everything.
Seconds, 3 seconds. First, Yeah. Yeah. Well, while he's fixing it, I will try to improvise. At any rate, so I'm obviously honored to be. Oh, it's working. That is good. Yeah. It's just okay. Now it's centered. Cool. Thank you. So, I mean, it's an honor to be here, and it's. I mean, you can imagine speaking after Dennis and Linda. It's just so easy. So, cool. And yeah, should I be close? Okay. Oh dear, closer. Yeah, that's much better. All right. So I was just saying that I'm honored to be here, and I will. I think that Cynthia has inspired me so much in many ways to do a lot of things in my life, and obviously she's responsible only for inspiring the good things that I have done. But the reason why I titled it's still a bit up, but it doesn't matter. The reason why I titled my talk Cynthia Stohl, the Timeless Scholar, is that invariably, no matter when I picked up any of Cynthia's vast collection of books or articles, it was not only interesting and obviously eloquently written, but it was always sort of speaking, and it was relevant to the many things going on around the world. And I think that's the sort of value for someone that is non-American, or for someone that is not in a communication department, but in a kind of like semi-communication department in business school, that her work resonates so much across disciplines. And I think many of you in the room know what I'm talking about. So in many ways, the breadth of Cynthia Stohl's scholarship is evident because of the unique impact of her work that sort of grows across disciplines, in whether it's organizational sociology or political science or science and technology studies or social movement studies, so on and so forth. So in this respect, I think that Cynthia's work sort of resonates across the social sciences in many ways that cannot be really restricted to a particular time or fashion. So I will just go, briefly, if these things work. Apparently it doesn't work. At any rate, so T from timeless stands for theoretical depth. And already Linda and Dennis have mentioned that. No, it's funny. It's dripping. Yeah. And I will basically talk about three themes that sort of inspired me, and what I can see also inspires a lot of scholars around the world. The first one is collective action and network engagement. And as Dennis and Linda has talked about already, there is a core strand in Cynthia's work that sort of inspired me, and I could see that it sort of stands out across the different disciplines, that she was able to reconceptualize collective action in a way that sort of allowed scholars around the world to research and to understand not only the participatory possibilities that collective action involves, but also the constraints that they're induced by it. And among the first graduate courses I have taken, we were supposed to read a passage from Connected in Action, the book, and that is written in 1995. And many students in the room were born in 2000. Regardless of that, many students sort of appreciated so much the way Cynthia was able to reframe the network metaphor and to make it, in a way, explicit, and to allow students to use it to examine the way in which communication is embedded in the multiple in the multiple relationships and systems within the organization. The second award the second award-winning book, which Cynthia wrote together with Bruce Birimber and Andrew Flanagan, extended further this line of research and allowed a reconceptualization of collective action as a phenomenon in which technology enhances people's ability to cross boundaries in order to interact with each other and to engage in organizations. And as Linda was saying, this book is so powerful in many ways because it blends literatures from political science, political communication, organizational sociology, and social movement studies. And in many ways, she's able to make contributions to all of these strands of research. So in a sense, or in a nutshell, I think Cynthia's work on collective action continues to deepen our understanding of citizen participation and organized advocacy, and specifically allows and inspires scholars around the world to understand how online platforms facilitate and also importantly hinder group mobilization. A last or second strand in research that Linda, you mentioned and inspired me quite a lot is employee participation in workplace democracy. And her influential piece written with George Cheney on participatory processes and paradoxical practices, which is true, has over, I think, 800 citations, which is simply mind-blowing. In that, Cynthia interrogates several main categories of participatory paradoxes, that of structure, identity, power, and agency. And that article is so dear to me in many ways because it inspired my work, my dissertation work on cooperatives. And being in Europe in a business school, one doesn't necessarily deal with literatures or with colleagues that do research, neither on cooperatives nor on participatory paradoxes. So in many ways, it allowed me to see the end of a tunnel during my dissertation times. And in Denmark, one doesn't necessarily see the light for multiple months a year. So thank you, Cynthia. And yeah, I mean, a third, this doesn't work, but anyway, hopefully at some point it will work. A third theme, which I really found great inspiration in Cynthia's work, is her work on the intersection between emerging technologies, transparency, visibility, and secrecy. And the multiples of the articles that were mentioned that Shiv and Cynthia wrote together on communication technologies, so whether it's social media or collaborative platforms, so on and so forth. And how this altered organizational transparency and oversight inspired a wide group of researchers, both in Europe and all over the world. Likewise, her article together with Shiv and Delaney on visibility agents offers such a fresh conceptualization of these processes and offers a new framework for understanding how digital traces are curated, policed, obscured in global collaborations. And this is such an important line of work that inspires so many people. Finally, in the interest of time, and that this doesn't work anyway, I will sort of jump over some, but what I really wanted to mention is something that Linda briefly mentioned. Her seminal article together with Michael on clandestine organizations in organization studies, published in organization studies, made such a big impact, and also steered a lot of responses and a lot of discussions among the scholars, both in Europe and in the US. And this one, for those of you that, I think most of you know it, maybe some of you might not know it, examines the phenomenon of secret agency and clandestine organizations from a communication-centered perspective. And this article sort of made a unique and strong impact, both on myself and other scholars, because it not only allows us to understand secret organizations and agencies, but also allows a sort of different take on the CCO, communicative constitution of organizational literature. So it's nice to see that these different streams of literature can be combined. Finally, in terms of the, of the international focus, is not only, I'm so sorry, it's the air conditioning that doesn't, all day I've been like this. So oh, thank you so much. You're so kind to save me. All right. So in terms of international focus, of course, it's not only Cynthia's globalization research that allows her, obviously, to have an international focus in itself, but as you will know, she has honorary professorships in Denmark, France, and New Zealand. And I can attest to you on behalf of the Danes, although I'm not a Dane myself yet, at least, that they're so proud of Cynthia's special connection with the Kingdom of Denmark. And equally, I am always so happy that when Cynthia is in Copenhagen. And lately, my son has learned Halloween origami from Cynthia, and he was so happy. So I'm deeply thankful that Cynthia has so many multiple talents. Finally, obviously, I mean, in her work, it's over 120 articles plus, it doesn't show again, plus book chapters and so forth. So, I mean, this sort of speaks and is testimony to her impact on the field of organizational communication, and not just within the US, but also around the world and in Europe. Finally, in terms, E stands from energy in the timeless. And everyone who has met Cynthia, I guess in this room, knows that her energy is both endless and contagious. And it's something that had inspired me so much in my life. At moments when I felt somehow I just couldn't push it further, I just think of Cynthia and I suddenly feel refreshed. I'm actually sincere. And it's not just her energy fuels her scholarship, but also fuels her kindness. I remember this was something like 11 years ago or more when I was visiting Santa Barbara. And obviously as a European, young and restless grad student, I decided that I want to have a bicycle and I don't want to drive, I just want to cycle everywhere. And obviously the thinkable happened, where riding the bicycle uphill in some of those hills, I saw a snake and I thought that I can just ride over the snake because I'm very silly, because I've never seen like a snake on a pathway before. And obviously, like my wheels, I slided and I fell on my knee and I was in crutches for like 3 weeks. And and Cynthia and Michael were so kind to drive me around and help me. So yes, thank you so much. So finally, L in the timeless is from leadership, and I'm not even going to mention the various months of work that Cynthia has done for this division and for the ICA as a whole as a president. And I still remember that when you were president, everyone was cornering you in every corner of the, I think this was London, and you were still so kind and you were speaking to everyone. So yeah, you're a true idol in many ways. E stands from, this one died already, all right. E stands from ethical commitment, and it's as we also talked in the pre-conference, that it's not only that your research is driven by ethical commitment in itself, but also the themes that you have addressed push forward young scholars to address, to put the good of the community or or social justice globally at the core of their scholarship. And this is quite important, and probably is what makes our division so special compared to other strands of work. So finally, S is from, does it go? Leadership? No. S is from strategic vision, and this is the last S. And this is something that I admire also in Cynthia, in the sense that you have this ability to see the big picture in a way with a grain of salt, and to take the various developments around the world, and see probably or at least try to see the best of it in them. And I think this one allowed you to anticipate trends and challenges across disciplines, and in a way makes your research quite relevant to whatever is going on in the world. So what I wanted to do, but obviously it doesn't work, is to finish. Let me see if I can do this. Okay, no, like this it works. To finish the word timeless, in the interest of time, it's gonna, let me see if it goes. It doesn't work. Yes, this works. That I cannot but end on the beats of the contemporary street philosopher The Weekend, which echoes that Cynthia is a timeless scholar, one that transcends any particular era or academic trend. And then, as the young kids or youth say, that Cynthia is legit. Thank you.
We don't need it. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. You've got something there.
Testing 1, 2.
This may end later.
Have you ever wondered about what you would think about when you retired? And you look back on your life and your career? Would you celebrate all the wonderful things that you did? Or maybe you just breathe a sigh of relief that the pressure was off. Well, we have been there, and we've done that. And yes, retiring is a relief. And even if you retire, though, the future can look very, very interesting, challenging, rewarding, and in some ways, irresistible. And all we can say tonight is go for it, girl. Yeah, because you've been going for it your whole life. So we would like to mention a few things that Cynthia can look back on with pride and perhaps for the future with anticipation. But we are, as many of you may know in this room, scuba divers. And we just can't resist offering some underwater analogies. In Cynthia's case, to the splendid pink starfish. Now, Cynthia embodies many of their special talents, which fittingly are highlighted by the acronym PINK. Yes, that's P-I-N-K, pink. To date, however, she is the only known specimen of this unique combination of talents in this rare species in the academic world. Okay.
Let's see if it works.
You ready, folks?
The pink starfish. Okay, so we're going to go through the letters one at a time, P-I-N-K. So P is for panoramic thinking. And as I listened to Dennis, I thought, this is very similar to what Dennis was talking about with cosmopolitan thinking. So maybe we should call her a kink starfish.
Maybe kinky.
Kinky. Okay. So
Let's not carry this too
Oh,
far.
sorry. I always go too far.
okay, for those of you who are not scuba divers in the audience, starfish are actually five-eyed creatures. See, that is the pink one there, and there is such a thing called pink starfish, but they have eyes at the tip of each of the 5 arms. And it's set up so that the visual field on each arm overlaps with the visual field on the arm right next to it. So starfish can actually see a 363-degree panorama around themselves. Now, we can't be sure that Cynthia is limited to only 5 eyes, but it's clear that her multi-pronged vision contributes to helping us understand issues that are very central to many, many different parts of the field. And Linda went through a lot of these, so I won't repeat them all, but you've heard non-governmental organizations, collective action, and so forth.
Bona fide.
bona fide groups. I won't go through the whole list because Linda did a great job of doing that. Okay. And when she does this, her work really takes the big panorama. And I'm just going to do one example of many, many. And that's the award-winning treatise with Bruce Bimber and Andrew Flanagan, which totally repositioned collective action and public goods theory as, again, an ocean analogy, one reef system in a larger ecosystem, oceanic ecosystem that includes very sophisticated digital technologies. They showed how the classic theory of collective action and public goods, it's been around and studied in lots of different disciplines for 60 years, is really a subset of communicative behaviors, particularly in the digital world, and that we need to think of that as a subset. And then they built a bigger theory around that, of which that theory is a subset, totally revamping it. Obviously, you can see why it won in a lot of awards. Now, Peter and I ourselves have conducted research on collective action public goods for decades, and we can attest to how this kind of work has really changed not just the way people look at it in communication, but throughout the social sciences. So 5 starfish eyes actually offer a pretty fascinating view of the way the world works. I have to show that slide. There's panoramic thinking. See the starfish eyes?
So, I is for the plethora of outstanding contributions as an institutional builder. Yes, an institutional builder for ICA and her diversity of intellectual homes that she's lived in and operated in. Now, starfish are decentralized, and each arm is capable of performing many of the same functions as the rest of the central body. So when we think of Cynthia as having so many fingers in the pie at ICA, well, like the starfish, she does. But that's not a bad thing. As ICA president and as leader of endless initiatives and task forces at all levels of the organization, she has worked ceaselessly to shape ICA as we know it today. For example, one important thing that distinguishes our own ICA from other organizations is our core international focus and mission. This focus did not just spring up by chance. In fact, Cynthia has been spearheading this issue for ICA on this front from when she was a graduate student and on the board of the ICA as a member representative. And what did she do? She objected vociferously, and you know what I mean by that, to the fact that the ICA elders at the time, remember she was a student, decided that they would have the first international ICA conference in Honolulu, Hawaii. And she said, that's not international. And though her objection didn't sway everybody in the room, in fact, if I recall correctly, it didn't sway hardly anyone. Actually, as I get the signals from her right now, it didn't sway anybody. But in the long run, her influence carried a lot of weight and helped develop the core changes in the organization that lead to the kind of international programs that we see ICA holding today. Now, importantly, her own work makes the case as to why such a global frame of reference is so valuable for communication scholars. Her own research is cited by authors in dozens of countries and on 5 different continents. Research that draws on her work is published in multiple journals in a variety of different languages throughout the world. It is not surprising then that she would help ICA improve its international footprint. Other contributions are endless, and examples taking the reins for organizational-wide strategic planning that she did just the last 2 or 3 years. And let me tell you, that was not an easy undertaking on her part, but absolutely critical for the future of our association. And she also was the leader or the chair of the committee that was so important in replacing the irreplaceable executive director, Michael Haley, 10 years ago. And of course, that has had a great influence on our association by the election of Laura to the executive director over the last close to 10 years now. And she, of course, as we heard earlier, did institution building at Purdue as chair of the department there, and as a center at directing a research center at UCSB, and always being consulted by her co-conspirator, Professor Henry Yang, Chancellor of UCSB. Well. Like that industrious pink starfish, she never buries her head in the sand, but employs those multiple tentacles where it counts most.
Okay, well, N is for next generation influence. And we've got a little of this from what Oana was talking about earlier. But so starfish reproduce, how do you think? By spawning, they send millions of eggs of sperm far away into the water to create future generations. You don't have to take that too literally. Can you imagine Cynthia spawning all her ideas out there into the cosmos for the next generation to thrive? Okay, so an analysis I did on Google Scholar, and this was for just one of her, how many publications, Dennis?
120 plus.
One of her 120 publications
81.
in which she is the senior author. And it showed that 46.2% of the citations were from junior scholars, including not only faculty, but also recent PhD students and MA students as well. And so you can see that her impact really spans even 3rd generation scholars. And I think that makes her a grandma starfish as well. Google Scholar also showed that of her work published more than 30 years ago, looking at those, 6 of those papers are cited recently. They're still cited today. She's looking surprised.
Are you trying to figure out which ones?
I have all the records if you want.
Yeah, let us know. We can tell you.
So pink starfish live in the Pacific Ocean. They live about 20 to 30 years. So maybe to most humans, this doesn't seem very long, but if you compare it to other life, like an octopus, how long do you think an octopus lives?
A year.
18 months, exactly, average, 18 months. So the key is not just, Cynthia's professional life, which of course is not over, but how her influence and inspiration lives on for many more decades.
K is for kaleidoscopic thinking. Now, think about the first time that you had the thrill of twisting a kaleidoscope. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with what you might have been having beforehand, but And think about how amazed you were at how the world changed shape with each twist. It's interesting to note that starfish have hundreds of little cups on their feet, allowing them to behave like a kaleidoscope by changing direction, moving up and down and sideways, and even flipping over for a new and different perspective on the world. Yay. Can't you imagine Cynthia constantly flipping over to get different perspectives and views of all things communication? Can't you just see her saying that some scholars think our organizations are transparent enough, but they are not, and they need to be, and here's how. Or how should NGOs fill the structural holes between themselves and nation states to change the international world for the better? Cynthia offers a major flip that conceptualizes the networks of NGOs and IGOs and nation state actors, not as competitive and simple additive entities, and the way that they have been seen, or in the way that they have been seen for decades. Rather, the relationships are symbiotic, where their actions are synergetic in their network and make the whole far greater than the sum of its parts. Cynthia and Michael have shown a number of sideway moves to offer a new view of terrorist networks. They detailed how the loose way that the metaphor of networks has led to 5 critical and fairly faulty assumptions about terrorist networks, assumptions that have driven disastrous and ineffective policy decisions in nation states for decades. They offer compelling and quite exciting ideas for empirical research on the communicative and network understandings of terrorism. They also suggest specific ways that policy makers can use academic work on communication networks to develop and apply much more effective policies and programs. Cynthia is certainly an intellectual gymnast. Like the starfish, she can move, twist, flip, and turn in order to twist that kaleidoscope to create alternative visions and exciting and important phenomena that have been mired in different and sometimes false assumptions for decades. Sometimes in very, very interesting ways. We'll let you imagine what those might be. Okay. Cynthia, your colleagues and ocean lovers in the field of communication take off our goggles in salute to you. All we need now is for this celebratory pick is the missing pink Stolefish.
Stolefish.
So, a personal word from us in closing. It's been great to be a friend, a colleague, and a person who's been on the intellectual journey that we've had over the last 40 years here in ICA and in the communication discipline. We know we don't have 40 more years, but we hope that the next years we have will be equally as fun and enjoyable with you and with Michael.
Thank you. And now may I call to the stage our timeless pink starfish distinguished scholar, Professor Cynthia Stohl. Can we have a hand for her?
Thank you. Thank you. Is this on? I'm overwhelmed. I mean, I am Dennis, Linda, Peter, Oana, Janet. Thank you for everything. You have been my friends. You have been my colleagues. You have been my support. I couldn't have done it without you. And Shiv, what can I say? We've been on a journey together that has been ups and downs, up in mountains and down on water and all sorts of places. And we've had very defined roles, faculty, student. I was a department chair, you were a beginning assistant professor somewhere. But you've been so much more than that. You've been my co-author, my teacher, my friend, my cheerleader, my therapist. You've been a member of our family, as has Paul. So we adore you, and I adore all of you. And it's interesting, in 1981, when I did my dissertation, it was on social networks and children's communicative competence. Now, I was not a child when I wrote my dissertation, far from it. But I too became confident and confident from my social network of those of you here and those of you in the audience. And I look out and I see so many parts of my life I am truly shaking. And I have to first, before I go any further, thank my husband, because Michael, for 56 years, you were the first person who said to me, you should be a professor, you should do research. You showed me what a good life that was. You also had your own work on terrorism and your commitment to social justice and your commitment to peace and human rights that has always inspired me, both personally and professionally. And thank you. And finally, the only other thing I want to say is about ICA. ICA is an institution. It's not an organization. It's truly an institution. And embedded in it is our practice about the norms of professionalism. Embedded are our norms about ethics, and embedded are all the things that we aspire to as academics, whether it be inclusiveness that we want everyone to experience, whether it be the love and the support of a community like now. It is an amazing place. It has provided so much as far as education, insight, experience, that I will never give this up. This is always a part of my family, and I want to remain a part. So I want to thank everyone for all the encouragement, the nourishment. And again, I wish I could name every one of you and tell you what we mean. So I'm hoping that we can have a drink and I can do that, because I need one after this. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Please do come up and congratulate Cynthia. I think the reception is going to start shortly. Please do stick around, have a drink, celebrate. And thank you so much for being here.